Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Pod with Zuha. And today I'm here with someone special, a writer and a friend, Chiedoziem Micheal. So welcome to my channel.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's nice having you here.
Thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here with you, to be on this podcast that I've followed for some time.
Yeah.
That is been doing a lot of good work in highlighting important topics that we should be talking about.
Exactly. So guys, today we'll be talking about family. We'll be talking about intimacy. We'll be talking about Nigeria and Igbo culture in general. So I want to start from your career. Because obviously you're a writer and you're written some books. But from Finding Adesua to Lost is an Aftertaste of Memories, which is your most recently released novel.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about writing. What made you interested in writing? Even though like in Nigeria, writers are not really they don't really value that talent as it's supposed to be valued. So what made you continue in that line of career?
My interest in writing began in my young adulthood, close to the end of my teenage years. I was about 19, 20, and the one way which people become interested in writing is through reading. You read something and it makes so much impact in you, and then one begins to have that hunger to be able to write something that has a similar impact on another person. The way what he or she has read has that impact on them. So that was how it began. It began with poetry, because I remember around 2014 there was a poem I saw on Facebook that was basically trying to warn Nigerians of voting Buhari's government in, and all the bad things that would happen if they voted that government in. For me, what gripped me was the use of language. It was so fascinating. I didn't recover from it for long. So eventually, when I connected with this person who wrote that poem, she was the first person who told me that we were all poets and all we needed to do was to go get the words out. That was how it began for me. Before I started reading a lot more literary books. And then when I read Chinua Achebe's Arrow of God, that was how my journey to becoming a novelist began. So one becomes interested in writing by reading.
So based on writers not really having like opportunities like they're supposed to have in Nigeria, what is the pioneer for your consistency throughout the years? What made you consistent despite the situation of the country? This place is not really a place where talent is valued to a certain extent. So what is the pioneer for your consistency? What is the fuel for your consistency throughout the year?
I in as much as I had never wanted to be a writer in childhood, eventually becoming a writer, young adulthood, and continuing with it now, for me, when I look back, it seems like destiny. Something that was shaped by destiny. When I became a writer, it was my consciousness in a certain way was that I needed to do this thing because this was a gift that I had been given. And this was something that I felt like I could do to the very best if I worked hard on it to develop that skill. And the more I wrote, the more my writing gained more meaning. It gained more meaning because most times I feel like I am writing to put my own life in perspective and to also give meaning to the world around me, give meaning to the life that I have lived. So it is not just something that you do because it's a hobby, or it's not just something you do because it's fun. Writing has never been fun for me. When I was in school, my notes were hardly up to date. It was so the act of sitting down to write is difficult for me. But what has made me consistent is that it is as though this writing, this vocation has become my life.
Okay.
So it is more like a situation of write and your life has meaning. And if you do not write, it becomes as though one's life is wasting away. A lot of great writers have talked about feeling horrible when they are not writing. So I write in order that my life can be put into perspective through my writing, in order to give meaning to my existence. I write because this is like something that feels like destiny. So that is part of what has fueled the consistency, because it is more like
part of you.
It has become a part of me.
Okay. Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. I appreciate the answer.
Yeah.
So going to the next one, because I've seen even via your social media pages that you're a pioneer of culture, especially because you're Igbo, you're a pioneer of Igbo culture.
Yeah.
So Igbo people, as a people, they are pushing out a kind of, they are coming out more now. So what do you think about the movement of the Igbo people? What do you think about the movement?
I think,
and what do you think they need to do more to become a better, to
become a better people?
A better people, exactly.
We are at the point in history where, among the people, there's this renaissance of sorts going on, renaissance of consciousness.
Yeah.
You see it in the politics, you see it in our culture, you see it in our spirituality. It's very, very important, because I think that this is a response to being stifled by colonialism and neocolonialism.
Yeah.
When the people begin to think about themselves in the light of, we are not where we are supposed to be.
Yeah.
We ought to have made more progress than we've made in our current dispensation. They begin to look inwards to see where we've gone wrong, where have we gone wrong, what have we done wrong, So I think that it's something very important that's happening, and we need to be a bit more conscious of the direction this is steering us, because, for example, a lot of people are going back to Ordinala.
Yeah, exactly.
And on the surface, it looks it is as though we are going back, but also there's also this problem where a lot of people are going back to it because they feel like it's the path to making money.
Yeah, okay.
And that's where you see things like, people doing rituals for money and all this, that's not the right way to go.
Exactly.
Because the consciousness driving that, it's not the kind of consciousness that moves the society forward. But if it is to learn more about ourselves, who are we? How did we become what we are?
Yeah.
We were told that our culture was bad, but now we know that it's not bad. There are certain parts of it that are bad or quite alright, but the culture in totality is not bad. Then that is something that is good. Then we are also getting into this phase whereby a lot of our thinkers are beginning to be more conscious and are beginning to become more outspoken. We have to look out for these people. We have some people among us that are very illustrious, that are blessed with good fortune. We have to make sure that we move away from this culture of spreading money in weddings, lavish lifestyle, to becoming more introspective in the way we employ our wealth to better ourselves. We need new philosophers, we need new thinkers, and we need to fund more projects that are in the arts, in the sciences, and in philosophy, so as to lay down a good blueprint for the forthcoming generation.
Wow, that's so cool. Then my next question is about African mothers and growing up as an African child. Because definitely I grew up as an African child, and when everybody is telling their stories, it seems like everyone is telling the same pattern of story, is channeling towards the same direction. Upbringing has an impact in most people's life, the way their parents trained them. Then as an African child, how did that channel your direction? How did the way your parents brought you up channel your direction and channel your decisions in life. Yeah.
Wow. That's a very important observation. As an adult, I'm somebody who is very, very interested in childhood upbringing and the impact that generally the way our parents brought us up impacts the way we become.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of what I do as a person, my interest in knowledge, my interest in leadership and community building came from sort of how I was brought up as a first child in a family that has 6 children, So in all of what I do, though, I think one of the most important aspects of what my parents did for me was bringing me up with a healthy self-esteem.
Yeah, okay.
I think my parents did that for me. Self-esteem is actually very important. Every day in my life, I see people who are living below their capacity.
Yeah.
I see very extremely talented people, extremely brilliant people, beautiful people, but they are not living even close to their capacity because they have self-esteem issues. I feel like self-esteem is something that if you lack it, it dilutes who you are.
Yeah,
so for me, part of what has helped me to always reach excellence in what I do and to always aim for certain heights, even when there are limitations, is the healthy self-esteem. I think that is one of the best gifts parents can give to their children.
Okay, I get that. So they made you have a healthy self-esteem. How was growing up for you? How did your mother play that role, or your father played that role in your life? How did your mother and your father play that role? Because the way parents relate to children is what can make their self-esteem high or make a child have low self-esteem. So how was your relationship with your mother and your father, and how were they correcting you when maybe you did something wrong and stuff like that? So
my relationship with my parents was not perfect, but it was a very good one.
Okay.
Beginning from my mother, or in fact both of them, because my parents really believed in me as a child.
Yeah.
I remember that when I was in the final years of my kindergarten, there was this trouble at home. Not like I don't know if trouble is the right word, but there was this worry at home about my performance in school at the time, because I used to come 8th, I've come 8th class, there was a day I came 12th, and there was this worry because in my very, very first year in school, I had very, very good results.
Okay.
I think I'd even come first. I'm the only one of my parents' children to have come first in my very first year in school. And my parents were worried that how can a child that began so well be doing so poorly? And they kept telling me that this is what is expected of me, this is what is expected of me. And all of a sudden, one day I began to do very well again in school. And I feel like when you're doing well, if your parents let you know that this is how it is supposed to be, it spurs you on to want to do more. Now, when you're not doing very well and there's this, sometimes expectation can become pressure, but when done in the right way, it encourages the child. There's this subconscious effect it has on the child to keep striving for more. So my parents used to tell me a lot of good things. My mother would tell me that my brain is magnetic, that she would say things like all you needed to do was look at a book and you understood it. I actually believe that, and then I would open a book and just look at it and try to see really I've captured everything in my head. It took me becoming an adult to finally realize the kind of emotions that must have driven that kind of confidence.
Exactly.
My father also used to, so I feel like what you tell a child has a long way in influencing them. A lot of parents need to imbibe positivity into their children, and because childhood is a very repetitive phase, because basically what our parents tell us today is the same thing they tell us tomorrow.
Exactly.
So when they tell you positive things over years, it's metamorphoses into something in your consciousness that makes you either a mentality monster or a mentality or somebody with a mentality that is not very good. Basically, I come across a lot of people who have poor mentality, who have healthy mentality, and when you have conversations with them, you always realize that it has to do with childhood and somehow how they were brought up. Yeah.
All right. Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yes. So, guys, parents, just that speak positivity into your children. So we have more adults with healthy self-esteem. So this brings me to the other question. I want to ask you about intimacy and relationship. What do you think? And there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on social media. Right. So I want to ask you, what is your take on relationship, intimacy, and finance? Especially because almost everybody is just attacking. I don't know what they have gone through, but there are a lot of things on social media. People, guys attacking girls attacking, and it's based on one thing. Is either financial problem in the relationship, or maybe someone is broken and decides not to maybe like go through whatever they're going through. Then any kind of trigger, any small thing will trigger the person, and they start
Speaking from their own bias.
exactly. They start speaking from their own bias. So what do you think about relationship? What do you think about intimacy? And also heartbreak. What do you think about heartbreak? I was watching a video, obviously, and I've had that experience. If someone was saying that heartbreak can channel you to God. Yeah, heartbreak can, maybe when you're in a relationship with someone and all of a sudden they break your heart, it makes you reset and all that. Then this brings me to this is the question I want to ask. What's your view about relationship, intimacy, and finance? How do you think we can get better in relationships and even marriage? Because it seems like during our parents' days, their marriages lasted longer. So what do you think is the pioneer for that lasting relationship and intimacy? Because obviously no one is perfect. We are still, do you get? But what do you think is the pioneer for lasting relationship in marriage and also intimacy and finance? What do you think is the best way for us to handle it as a generation? What's your comment?
Well, I think it all boils down to us realizing that as human beings, we are in constant search for connection.
Yeah.
Constant search for someone who understands us. Constant search for where we can be loved.
Exactly.
And underneath that search for this connection, love, there's also the aspect of ourselves that we have to battle.
Yeah.
Some of us were not brought up with love. Yeah. So in order for us to be able to deal with love, first of all, we have to teach ourselves how to love ourselves before we can teach ourselves how to be loved by others or how to receive the love given to us. Even how to recognize love when you see it. And it takes absolute humility, in my opinion, to be able to do all of this, because even when you have a better disposition in your consciousness towards these things, sometimes it still takes being humble to be able to connect with another person, to be able to, deal with another person. In our generation, a lot of things are at stake. I think one of the things, like we started off talking about parenthood and upbringing. One of the things I think we as a generation, we need to backtrack on, or we need to retrace our steps, is in the way we were brought up. Some of us have to be careful to not repeat that pattern on our children. And what makes that possible is recognizing what is wrong with you, what is wrong in yourself. So when you get into a relationship with another person, it's important to know what the great things about being with somebody like you is. It's also important to know what difficult things about being. What does anybody who wants to be with you, what does the person have to tolerate? And if you can have good conversations with the person too, you can get to know who they are. And in that way, you could be able to carve out a way for the relationship to work. One of the things that we lack a relationship nowadays is social. The social aspect of it, which is communication. we are in the world of social media, and where we feel like where you just have to type on your phone and send message to somebody, and they hi and they respond to you.
Yeah.
Some of us mistake that for communication.
Okay.
It is not necessarily communication as much as, those days when people needed to see each other,
before
talk to each other, or write letters to each other and wait for weeks before the letters arrive.
Exactly.
So when you have weeks to reflect upon what you want to tell a person,
Yeah.
whatever you're going to say is going to be more profound.
Exactly.
It's going to be more decisive. But unlike today, in social media, and you just feel like easy connectivity.
Okay.
We find it hard to do the work, the deeper work. And now even to communicate becomes hard. You see people going through something, and they are finding it hard to open up to their partners.
Yeah.
So communication is a problem. And the problem of the self, which is also that self-esteem issue, ego. When a bad ego can ruin a very good relationship. You have to be humble to be able to make sure you do not spoil your blessings. Now, when it comes to heartbreak, of course, things can go wrong in a relationship. Even very good relationships sometimes suffer mishap. And sometimes we even make the mistake of thinking that the only time we go through heartbreak is when the relationship ends. Sometimes even within the relationship, there are still some heartbreaks. There are still some pain. You cannot love without pain.
It's true.
You can't love without enduring pain. Now, there are two ways a person can react to heartbreak. I learned from, I think, a Hindu priest said two ways people react to heartbreak. One person becomes bitter.
Okay.
And wounded. Meanwhile, the other person becomes wise. You can either become bitter and wounded, or you can become wise.
Okay.
Heartbreak can teach you how to navigate the complex labyrinths of relationship and land people in trouble. One heartbreak is enough to teach you how to spot the red flags, or how to survey the mood of your relationship, to know when things are going well and when things are shaky, and how to attack them head on, and how to prepare yourself for anything. On the other hand, if you don't learn anything from the heartbreak, you begin to look at it from a lens of being a bitter person. You become bitter, you become wounded. And this is where you see people on social media calling themselves bitter feminists, or you see red pill, these red pill guys who are pushing patriarchy in a very, very vitriolic and chauvinistic way. And this is because these people are bitter. They've not really learned. Now, part of it comes from not learning any lesson. Because when you learn lessons, you know your faults.
You try to correct it.
You know not just the fault of your partner, but the parts, where you shortchanged yourself, or the mistakes you made. And then the second aspect of being bitter is now wanting to control another person. You want to control another person in a relationship. You want everything to go the way you see it to go, forgetting that you are both human beings. And, a good relationship is one in which both people will agree and work together to make it good. So this is some of my view. For me, I think I prefer the aspect of being wise. I've learned a lot of lessons personally from my own heartbreaks. So I think relationships are a very beautiful thing when two people can be able to come together to make it work. And like I say, it takes humility to make that happen.
So, wow. Wow, that's so nice. That's so nice. Growing up, who was your role model, and who did you listen to more? The music, the novels, and the books you read? How?
I think growing up in a typical Christian household, definitely there were these examples that were set in stone. From the stories we heard. I think stories we heard, the way my father tried to teach us. My father definitely told us a lot of stories from the Bible, taught us a lot of things about Jesus. At a very young age, I know I had this love for Christianity in the religion. Certainly the words of Christ impacted me in a lot of ways.
Okay.
My father was also a very good role model because he was very intelligent.
Okay.
He was like, I've written somewhere that my father was like a human dictionary.
Okay.
He knew almost everything that I wanted to know at that time.
Okay.
And then in my own ways, I discovered certain other people that inspired me very well. Like I wanted to be a footballer at some point, and I loved Thierry Henry so much. He was one of those footballers that it gave me. I loved him so much, really a lot. And of course, there were people like Ben Carson. I read about 3 of his books at the time. Think Big Picture, Take the Risk, and then later as I grew older, Chinua Achebe, I had been reading his stories when I was much younger, but I began to understand them more the more the older I got. And then when it came to women, of course, my mother to some extent, we were always quarreling. But she had some good impact on me. And I think Dora Akunyili then on the TV because of the way my teachers always talk about her. Even though now when I think of her legacy, I think about it with so much sadness because of what the country has become. So these are like some male and female figures that impacted me as a child.
Oh, that's so cool. So the next question is, what's your view on failure? What's your view on failure? Because what do you think about failure?
I think that failure is, nobody wants to fail.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, most of us will have to embrace failure.
Okay.
We want to, especially if you're trying to achieve something profound, or you're trying to achieve a particular milestone in life. A lot of us see, there's something I read years ago. Somebody wrote that failure was not the opposite of success. If anything, failure is a path to success. It's part of the way to success. And I think that in my own life I've had my own fair share of failure. But one thing my father also told me that really, really shaped my mentality towards that concept is that you are never a failure because you fail. You become a failure the day you stop trying.
Exactly, sure.
And some of the most profound people in history, if you study their life properly, you find out that these people are actually failures and did not give up.
Exactly.
For example, I like to think of Leo Tolstoy, who's one of my favorite writers of all time.
Okay.
He was born into the Russian aristocracy. He
Yeah.
was born into a family. He was privileged because his family was wealthy. And he became one of the greatest writers the world have ever seen. But the funny thing is, Leo Tolstoy had so much records of failing many endeavors in his life. He failed to complete his law degree at the university. He went to the army and then dropped out at some point. He started an agricultural colony and he did not quite succeed with it. He even tried to form a new religion, borrowing from the principles of Orthodox Christianity and what he felt like, okay, this is where the church is going bad, and now let's put this into a new movement. And that did not much succeed either. But because he kept trying different things, and at the end of the day, he found his literary vocation and succeeded quite well at that.
Wow.
The world doesn't quite remember his failings as much as they remember his success. So I think that failure is like a path to actually what eventually leads you to what you are good at. And the world is better at remembering successes and failures. So if you fail 9 times and succeed once, be rest assured that the one time you succeed is going to be talked about far more than the 9 times that you failed.
Wow, that's cool. Wow. Wow. Now, coming to the last thing, loss is an aftertaste of memories. First of all, this title is a hit. You have to tell us how did that title came about? Then you now tell us about the book. How did the inspiration regarding loss is an aftertaste of memories
Yeah. My novel Lost an Aftertaste of Memories was like I think the second or the third book I worked on when I was at that time when the hunger to become a writer was, at its initial stage. I began writing it from February 2019 and completed it in February 2020. And the title of the novel, I always say that I didn't have a title while working on the book. I am somebody who struggles to come with not just title of stories, but also names for my characters even. So I was basically writing. I just kept on writing. It was close to the end of the novel. The name just came to me. And I put it down, and I never had to change it again since then. So yes, and it's a book about childhood. The main character reminisces on childhood, parental upbringing, sibling rivalry, relationship with their siblings, friendship, religion, role that their religion had on them growing up. And how, of course, certain things happen to you and you feel a certain way about them. But then after time, after having had more experiences, you look back on them and you're like, oh, this happened then and I felt like this was what it was. But now when I'm looking at it again, maybe this is how I no longer feel that way about it. Maybe some of us felt bad about some of the disciplinary measures our parents employed in raising us, but then as adults, we look back at those things and we are grateful for our parents disciplining us in some of the ways they discipline us. And, some of our friends too were not very, they were not very, very, very kind of forthcoming towards us the way we were to them. And sometimes we felt like this person was wicked. But then you grow up and you realize that, no, this person had more boundaries than you. It didn't necessarily make them bad. So it was a book about reflecting on life, And much of it comes from memories. And now in between memories, there are certain experiences that we wish that we lived more. And we savored the moment. We just wish that we enjoyed this while it was going on. But now it's gone. Okay, now, but this also teaches me how to enjoy the moments where I am. So we are lost in between all of that. There's lost, there's memories. So that was how the name came to me.
Okay, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I've started reading the book and I came across a character called Nosike. Then
the main character.
Nosike is the main character. So it's just like that character Nosike is just like so many people, so many young boys growing up in an African home. So there was one part Nosike went to the river and he almost got drowned. And the parents had already told him, don't go to that river. And there is this thing again about young boys, like in Nigeria, in this African thing. It's just like they will tell you not to do it, but you end up doing it. And when something happens, you learn. You learn. So why do you think an African child, an African male child, has to test, and if it doesn't work the way he thought it would work, they will now reset? Why do you think that experience is necessary for them before they learn?
I think childhood is quite an adventure. It's quite an adventure. It's quite the adventure, even if you might say. As adults, we kind of have our lives more like in check. We've put some boundaries on certain things because of past experience. Okay, this is not for me. This is not for me. Okay, this is just what I want to focus on. But children are very starry-eyed about the world. The world is a big grand stage. So most times, parents who have become adults obviously know what is safe and what is risky.
Sure.
And they always try to put their children in the safe way, out of harm's way. But most times, children want to try out for themselves. Right? So I believe that Nosike was one of those kind of children, one of such people. He really, really wanted to do a lot of things. He had some friends who were adventurous as well, and he would often go with them to experience some of those adventures. And this was, of course, some of the things that landed him in some of the troubles he got into. And it is part of why he was reflecting on those things to say, okay, yeah, these are the things that happened to me. These are the reasons why I did some of the things I did, even though I was asked not to do them. And when this was how the eventuality, this was how it turned out. And this is what I think about it now, So yeah, I think that is part of why children we look at it as them being disobedient.
Okay. But they want to know.
They are just adventurous.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's so cool. And guys, you have listened to Chukwudera Chiedoziem Micheal.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for watching, and see you in our next video. Go order Losses and Aftertaste of Memories. You can check him out on Instagram at Chiedoziem Micheal Chukwudera. Order Losses and Aftertaste of Memories and have a grip of what the African child's history looks like.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.
Thank you.